On the show today, we have Dr. Ralph Esposito, a licensed naturopathic physician focused on optimizing health span and lifespan through preventative and lifestyle practices. He completed his training as a medical intern at New York University and is a certified functional medicine doctor. Dr. Esposito employs evidence-based tactics to provide a personalized approach to preventative medicine and is the Chief Science and Nutrition Officer at AG1. All right, Dr. Esposito, thank you so much for being here with us. Welcome to the More Life Project. We're super excited for this conversation. We know that you're an expert on all things longevity, gut health, nutrition. You're the Chief Science and Nutrition Officer for AG1. So I'd love to just open it up with a story of why you are so passionate and what brought you to this space.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for having me. Anybody who wants to listen to me, I'm always open to talk, especially when it comes to these topics. When I first was about 7 or 8 years old, my father had his first heart attack. So he was 47 and I was 7. That's when it started. So
Wow.
that's a heavy way to start, but it's actually the truth in the actuality of why I'm here and why I'm talking to you guys about these things. He had a second heart attack about a year or so after. And then pretty much from there, it's kind of all been downhill. And so my goal is to prevent that and stop that for as many people as possible in the world. And the way to do that is through the foundations of health: nutrition, exercise, sleep, emotions, mind, body, community, sunlight, environment. All of those things actually matter. And they drive me to actually learn more about all of these things that actually impact people's health on a daily basis. Fast forward about 10 years, I forced the local health food store to hire me. Um, Force was probably a light term. And so
Oh,
I've essentially been in the supplement industry for ever since I was a teenager, pretty much. And I've seen every single trend that comes and goes over and over again. I think at this point, I could probably predict where it's going to go in the next 3, 6, 9 year cycles. Um, so as I started to understand where supplements played a part, I also learned about nutrition and where nutrition kind of is a necessity and where supplements kind of fill the gaps, and vice versa, where supplements are a necessity and nutrition either can't fill those gaps or is just supplementary to the supplements. I went to NYU as an undergrad in nutrition. Thought I was going to become a registered dietitian and then become a medical doctor. And then I met with a few people who were my advisors, and they're like, no, 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 you're not going to go to medical school and learn nutrition. You're not going to go to medical school and treat people with nutrition. And I was like, wait, no, that doesn't make sense. I get to decide what I do. And they're like, well, you're not going to learn that. That's not going to be part of your training. You won't be able to implement it. And in fact, there really isn't much nutrition training in medical school. You should look at other things like a PhD. So I looked at other things like PhD, DO, all these other things, and I actually came across naturopathic medicine, which is um, I guess, the pioneers of preventative medicine and really understanding how you can use food, lifestyle, exercise as interventions to help people live better and prevent chronic disease. So I am not the um, I broke my arm, fix me doctor. Like if that happens to you, I got somebody for you. But if you really want to figure out, I don't want to have a heart attack, I don't want to have diabetes, I don't want to have chronic pain. How do I kind of get ahead of that? And that's where my training and my education took me, which then took me to the Chinese medicine route, where I learned to become a Chinese medicine practitioner. So I'm a licensed acupuncturist. And then after practicing for several years, almost 10 years, I then transitioned into more of a formal role as the chief science officer of AG1, where I was able to bring all this clinical experience and this life experience in the supplement industry and really make products that are focused on um, nutrition, lifestyle, foundation nutrition, and things that actually people can feel and have an impact rather than something that looks really nice on paper. And now I'm here at AG1. We developed our next gen of AG1, AGZ, a few other products that we've been working on. I'm just excited to actually be able to use these things for people that I could not even possibly help on a day-to-day basis.
Wow,
Wow,
that's
that's a lot.
awesome.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
we're
great.
super into just the preventative approach and overall wellness, health span, longevity. You know, we're both coaches for Orange Theory, and so we're working in the fitness space and trying to help our members live healthier, more vibrant lives. So it sounds like our passions are aligning. You just have all that extra schooling and knowledge that you can kind of help sharpen, our basic knowledge with.
Was it surprising? I mean, you kind of alluded to it already that it was, but I know it's surprising for me, and I think it's probably surprising for a lot of our listeners just how separate the wellness space is from the medical community and these preventative measures and diet and supplements and I think that, and we've talked a little bit about this before in our podcast, that there are a lot of people, and so I don't want to indicate that the medical profession is doing nothing in those areas. I think they are, but it is really surprising how preventative measures and supplementation and the ways that we can change our behaviors can impact our health. And I'm sure that would have been information you would have really loved for your dad back when, he was experiencing his health things. And so that you're taking that and trying to combine those things a little bit. I think that's great. And probably in order to impact, I know we're going to talk about health span versus lifespan, but I love to focus on that health span aspect of what you do.
Yeah. So was it surprising or is it surprising? I'm always shocked at how much medical professionals kind of understand, whether they're an MD or a DO or a nurse or a physical therapist. I'm actually surprised at how much they are aware of these things, but always at the surface level. It's kind of like, I understand nutrition is important. I understand that exercise is important. I understand that sleep is important. How important do you understand those things to be? And can you implement those things in a way that has an impact on a person's life? And so you really need to be trained specifically to understand those things. I'm not a personal trainer or a fitness instructor or an expert in exercise. So I'm not going to program for you. I'm not going to go ahead and try to understand what do you need to do to achieve these specific body composition or exercise goals. I'm not a marathon coach. And so I understand the importance of endurance training and zone two training and zone five training. And I know all of the impacts of what that has on the mitochondria and your overall health. But I'm not here to implement it as a therapeutic. And I think that's where we are, is like people are aware, but the implementation of it and the synergy that is important to understand between all of the things are really important. There's also this impact of knowing so much or knowing so little that you think you know so much. Then once you start learning more, you realize how little you know. And I think that there's just some people who don't know enough and assume that they know a lot. And then as they start researching and it takes them several years to figure it out, they eventually start to say, oh, what that guy said about 5 years ago, not so crazy, but it just took me a 5 year gap to figure it out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really, I know. Was
I
that
have,
saying, I know enough to make me dangerous?
oh,
I feel like
Mhm.
that's all of social media. And I feel like that is,
yeah.
yeah.
Or I have that story. I went to the doctor. I went to an MD a couple weeks ago, and I take more of a functional. I want more of a functional medicine approach, but I understand that there's an importance of both sides. And so this MD actually had extensive knowledge on functional medicine, supplements and hormones and all these things to optimize health. But she's like, came in so abrupt. She's like, this isn't what I get paid for. I have about 20 minutes to sit and talk with you. I can't go into all of these other things that I didn't go to school for. I have all the knowledge, and that's how I treat my children and myself. But I went to school to be an MD, and I get paid to prescribe and see more patients. And I was like, wow, like that's so discouraging because I don't have all that knowledge, and I just want help to see how I can optimize, again, my health span. So, yeah, people like you that are willing to come on podcasts and share your expertise and help educate us. It's so impactful. So we'd love to just start with, what is the difference between health span and lifespan? And that will take us, into the next topics.
Sure. So the simplest way that I like to do it is lifespan is how long you live, and health span is your quality of life. And so quality of life has actually, it's not new. Even when I was in my undergrad training, it was actually, or my undergrad education, I should say, it was a big part of quality of life. There's quality of life questionnaires. What can we do to improve? And as I was training as to be a dietitian, it's like, what are the things that we can do to improve this person's quality of life? But that's not just what they eat, but it's also their environment. It's what can we do to help give them access to more quality foods? So when I was starting to learn about nutrition, it was more about food deserts and understanding why is it that I went because I went to school at NYU, the South Bronx. What is the impact of poor nutrition quality there? What can food banks do to solve these problems? That's quality of life. So how well can you live? Not just feeling comfortable, but feeling well. And then lifespan is something that medicine has done a really good job at is how do we live longer, but not necessarily better. So there's like this, Matt Caberlin has this really great graph that I can share with you guys to share with your listeners is you have a regular graph and there's two lines. One line shows you hit 90 years old and you kind of just do a slow decline. You go flat, 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 and then at like 40, it just drops. Both end at 90. The second line is the health span line where you're flat, 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 40 flat, 50 flat, 60 flat, 70 flat, and then you start declining in the last decade of your life. That's health span. So you really want the graph that's going to prolong your plateau of health because that's actually a good thing. And
Yeah.
the way to do that is to reverse engineer what are the things that are going to impact my health span and what can I do to prevent that? And the way that you look at it is you help identify what are the things that kill people. It's pretty rudimentary and simple. Like if you don't want to be a victim of health span disease, like chronic disease, identify what those are and how do you undo them? Can you undo them? Some of them we can, some of them we can't. But if you want to prevent things that, take your life, like your lifespan, we can take drugs and even some interventions that'll help you live longer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're living better. And my expertise is in the former, is how do we extend life while also feeling well?
Yeah. So
That's
what are maybe the top three pillars to that?
to health span.
Yeah.
It's boring, but it
You're
works.
not
Make
boring
it
though, but
good but spicy.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
not boring. So even if your topics are boring, we believe in you. You're going to
Yeah.
make it fascinating for us.
Yeah.
Well, everybody wants the magic silver bullet. They also
Oh,
want
don't
the
we
new
know it?
thing. They
Yeah.
want the new thing, right? And I believe in the tried and true. I truly believe in what has been working for decades will continue to work for decades until proven otherwise. And that's really sleep, nutrition, and exercise. That's my top three. It's unfair to say that, mental health doesn't play a role into that because as I start seeing more and more patients and seeing how life is changing for them, and as I follow them throughout life, that you start to understand the impact of mental health on a person's physical health. So I would say it's a tie between, a swap in for those four, but sleep, nutrition, and exercise are the big pillars that you need to focus on.
Well, sleep, nutrition, and exercise, though, that is going to impact mental health, like mental health and physical health. I mean, I love that you allude to it because I think it's true. Mental health is such a huge component of the wellness space in general. But I do really firmly believe if your sleep is dialed in, your mental health will be better. If your nutrition is dialed in, your mental health will be better. If you're physically healthy, your mental health will be impacted. And not to gloss over mental health and disorders, but I really believe that it's a huge component of what will make us well.
Absolutely. And I don't look at mental health as just seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I actually think of it in a different lens of resilience. This will probably be the hot word or the trendy word for the next decade or so is resilience. Because what we're learning is actually health span and longevity are more of a result of how resilient are you to the things that will take your life. So There's a lot of people who will say, my mom, my grandma, she smoked, she drank for 40 years and she lived to be 90 something. Or the person, I think there was somebody who recently lived to be, 105 and she had eggs every single day. And we have demonized eggs for the past several decades, right? So but what really is a commonality between a lot of these people, even if you look at the centenarians, like in the blue zones, is actually resilience. How can we make the body more resilient to stress, more resilient to daily stressors, more resilient to infections and poor sleep? And that's where I think mental health really comes into play. So resilience is an underlying foundation that must be incorporated in all of these pillars.
Yeah. So, how do we increase our resilience?
There's a few ways to do it. Number one is actually exercise. I think exercise does more than just make you physically fit. It actually allows you to implement discipline. So
Mhm.
I don't wake up, I do train most days, but I don't wake up every day and say, I am so excited to be up at 5 a.m. to go lift.
What? What's wrong with you?
I know, but that's only within the first 30 minutes. But the
Right.
second I start, I am so happy that I did because I know the outcomes will be much more joyful, or I would take advantage of them. So exercise is a way to build resilience just from a physical perspective, right? Muscle building and endurance training. The other way to build resilience is actually through micronutrients and phytonutrients. So most people don't realize this, but we assume that if you eat, you're getting all of your nutrients and therefore you should be fine. Vitamins are called vitamins for a reason because they're vital nutrients. In other words, we can't make them. And that's actually where the word vitamin comes from. They used to think that was an amino acid. And they said, oh, well, we can't make these amino acids. Let's call them vital amines, so vitamins. But they're actually nutrients that our body can't make. And so if our body can't make them or can't make a majority of them, then it's like assuming that the body can function off of low quality gas for the remainder of its life and still function as if it were having,
Great
premium or
metaphor.
super.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good metaphor.
Yeah.
I like that.
Right.
So let's talk about gut health in relationship to getting your nutrients. A lot of that's absorbed through your gut, and if we're not getting them from our food, so we know that you are coming from AG1 supplementation through your greens. So let's talk about that. Like, how do we absorb those nutrients? What are you doing at AG1 to help this issue?
Yeah. So when I first got into the field of nutrition, and even as I started practicing, I would always repeatedly hear, not just from friends or family, but even clinicians, of you don't need vitamins, you don't need a multivitamin, just eat well. I've heard that my entire life. Just eat well. What does that mean? That's just saying, like, just exercise. What does that mean? Is that walking? Is that running? Is that a high intensity program? Is it CrossFit? Like, what is it that you consider to be training or exercising?
Yeah, which fad
And
should I jump on today to make that happen? Right.
exactly right. Exactly right. And so when it comes to nutrition and absorbing your nutrients, we don't get all of these nutrients from our diet. That is not a opinion, that is a fact. If you look at large epidemiological studies, over 10,000 people, something called the NHANES study, we're already seeing that most of Americans are not getting select nutrients like vitamin A, vitamin D, potassium, magnesium. And that's just measuring the basics. And that's using a bar that's pretty low, right? The DRI is very low for what we consider to be the recommended intake for most Americans. So even if we set the bar low, we're not even meeting that. And so part of my role at AG1, but also my role as a scientist is I have this question is, are we having enough of these nutrients? And if not, how do we help measure that? So what we're doing is, aside from actually doing research on the product, we're actually doing research in the field of discovery work of what nutrients are likely being underconsumed, where are they being underconsumed, and what is that nutrient insufficiency, not deficiency, right? Because we're not talking about scurvy. We're talking about, are there enough nutrients that have an impact on biological function? That's what we want to measure and discover so that we can actually help identify why is that not happening. And as you mentioned, if the gut is the medium by which we absorb nutrients, which is true, most of them, maybe vitamin D and a few others, then we need to identify how do we optimize our gut, because you can put them in, but that doesn't necessarily mean they actually get into the body. And so we're discovering all of those things.
Yeah. So how do we have a healthy gut? I've been told, and this was a trend a few years ago, but it's a real thing, I think, like that I have leaky gut. So I have all these nutritional deficiencies despite eating healthy, but
I
my
don't
gut
even know what
health,
that means.
it's about your
Leaky.
gut permeability. There's holes in my gut and my nutrients are going to my bloodstream. Is that it?
What is
Close.
leaky gut? Let's explain that, because that is a term that's
Okay.
bandied about. But I really have no idea what it means. So,
Yeah.
Dr.
Leaky.
So
Esposito.
it maybe about 8 or 10 years ago, I listened to a lecture in person from Dr. Alessio Fasano, who helped pretty much pioneer and discover this leaky gut. And I promised him I would never use that term leaky gut in a clinical or professional setting. And
Podcast setting.
coming from the guy who invented it, or who helped identify this pathology, it's really intestinal permeability, right? And so, but for our sakes and purposes, I can refer to it as leaky gut. And so, if you think about your cells in your gut, and if you put your hands together and like you fold your hands, there's really no gap between your fingers, right? Like you can make a pretty tight gap there to make sure no fluid or any kind of seeps through. And these are held by different adhesion molecules in the intestine, proteins and carbohydrates and combinations of the above. And the goal is to keep that really tight because your gut is actually the um, first barrier to the outside world. And in fact, your gut, most people don't realize this, your intestines are not part of your body. Think of like a big straw running through your mouth all the way through your body. Whatever goes in that straw is not in the body until it passes through and becomes absorbed. And so what the intestinal tract is to prevent permeability of select proteins, amino acids, nutrients, toxins, etc., so they don't get into the body. And we have an immune system there. And that immune system is, well, if we see something, say something, and it does, and it creates this immune response. Now, what happens is that when it sees too much, the intestinal wall will overreact or respond, or some of these proteins that should be completely broken down, instead of them being broken down into amino acids or dipeptides or tripeptides, they're absorbing longer protein molecules, which then the body says, I've never seen this before. I'm going to react to it. And that's actually the underlying approach or philosophy of leaky gut or intestinal permeability.
Yeah, that's
Well,
why
what were your
my
symptoms?
body's constantly freaking out. I still have my symptoms. You know,
It's
I
the
got
same.
inflammation, and
Okay.
again, it's nutrient deficiencies. It's like even if I eat the food that has the nutrient or take a supplement, it doesn't necessarily mean it's getting absorbed unless I don't know. So they gave me other stuff to do, and I had to cut out a bunch of foods because I had all these intolerances. And the way this was a functional practitioner, she was basically just telling me, you're not allergic to these foods, you're intolerant to them, and as we better your gut health and that intestinal permeability, you can probably reintroduce these at some point in time and your body then won't react. But it's been 5 years and I'm still messed up. So
Yeah, it's
There's
not
hope
an
for you.
allergy.
I believe there's hope.
There is hope. So another um, N of one antidote. I've been suffering from IBS since I was a little kid as well. I think I had like my first colonoscopy at like 8 years old,
Oh my
and
gosh,
trying to
it's
figure out
traumatizing. You poor kid. That's
yeah,
terrible.
I was on antacids at like 10. It had to be after, because I know I switched schools at like age 7, so it had to be around that time. And they couldn't figure out what was going on, and I've suffered with it my pretty much my whole teenage and young adulthood. until I went to school and figured it out. It does take time. So 5 years is unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that, but it does take time to kind of figure it out. And it's nuanced because you talk to somebody and you say, "Oh, I have this intolerance to this food," and it's like, "Oh, is it like lactose intolerance?" It's like, no, it's not like lactose intolerance. It's something different. Oh, is it an allergy like the peanuts? No, no, it's not like that. So they're actually categorized as hypersensitivities, and it's a immunological uh, definition of how your body responds to these things, whether it's IgG, so different types of antibodies, or IgE. They're all totally different, but are really just an immune response. And it does take time to address them. And nutrition is a big role. But there's also nutrients and herbs and botanicals and probiotics and prebiotics that all have an impact. It's really just trying to understand which ones are going to be most tolerable to me and which ones have good data behind them.
Okay. So which ones have good data behind them? AG1.
That was not intended to be a leading question, but
Hey, you teed yourself right up.
Yeah.
yeah. So there's one thing that we know that is true is that fiber acts as a prebiotic. And I don't think there's anybody.
The More Life Project is sponsored by Orange Theory Fitness. Orange Theory is an all-in-one dynamic blend of strength and cardio training that supercharges your metabolism to burn more calories and build lean muscle. Certified coaches guide you through science-backed workouts designed for all fitness levels. To learn more and to get your first class for free, stop in or visit orangetheory.com.
The More Life Project is a production of Aspire Holdings, LLC. The views and opinions expressed on the More Life Project podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Aspire Holdings, LLC, its sponsors, affiliates, or employees. The information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical or professional advice. Please consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your fitness, wellness, or nutritional routines. That's a hot topic. We're excited about fiber. This is good.
Fiber will be the new protein in about 2 years. So you heard it here, maybe second, but definitely heard it here.
I've been on the fiber kick for the last 2 years. Anybody that's been in a room with me for the last 2 years has heard me talk about fiber. It's been brought up on the pod a couple of times
She's
now.
a pioneer.
I am a pioneer in the fiber space. I just would like to say, but I'm excited. I feel like it's such an important thing. So I'm going to give you the floor. Teach us about fiber.
Well, I'm just going to note that on this date, and we're just going to come back to it in the future, timestamp that.
Okay.
So I think fiber is helpful. There's no arguing that fiber is a beneficial um, food for the gut. And I'm not going to bore you with different types of fibers. Yes, there's psyllium husk, and there's insoluble fiber and soluble fiber, and fiber from oats, and fiber from fruits and vegetables, and then there's resistant starches. I can go on and on and
There's
on.
a whole list.
Whole list. So what are the best fibers? What are the best prebiotics? And so when people look at fiber, there's fibers that are fermentable and fibers that are not. And then there's non-fibrous prebiotics. That's a whole different category that we're starting to learn about. And when I talk about the tried and true, this is one of those tried and true moments is what are the things that we know that have been used for generations, centuries that are still proving to be beneficial here. So non-fibrous prebiotics or non-fibrous fermentable foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurts, kefir. That's one category. And then you look at another category that are not fermented, and those are phytonutrients. So is it really the fiber from the broccoli, or is it the 1,000 other nutrients that are in the broccoli that the body's metabolizing? A prime example of this is actually green tea. So many people love green tea. They know green tea is healthy for weight loss, for metabolic health, for cancer prevention, etc. But what they don't know is that the constituents in green tea are not really fibers, but these are polyphenols that actually work to feed the gut and doesn't contribute to your fiber content. And so these are things that have been used for millennia, centuries, however long they've been used for. And we know that they have a beneficial benefit on the gut microbiome. And so that's why I like things like matcha, because it's just a very high quality prebiotic that is not a fiber. And then there's things like cocoa, which is full of, not chocolate, different,
Oh,
but
dang it. I was
cocoa.
so excited for a second.
Yeah. There's things in cocoa that are prebiotics separate of the fibrous content that you would find in a cocoa bean. And those are the things that we're starting to investigate and understand. What are these things happening doing in our gut? And I'll finish with this. The gut gets first dibs. So what we eat is not for us. What we eat is for what our microbiome decides it doesn't want and then passes along to us. And that's really a good understanding of how you want, if you want to really improve your gut health, think about it from that perspective. What do I want the things of the billions and billions and trillions of cells living in my gut that are not me, that they would be happy with? Because if they're happy, I'm probably going to be happy. And that's how I kind of approach a lot of this from a scientific perspective and from a clinical perspective.
Yeah, that's really great advice, but also really challenging when we're surrounded by all these processed foods, these quick fixes. You also have a bunch of supplements that aren't as well known or well researched as AG1. So it's this crazy amount of information that we're having to sift through, and people are like, "Oh, I want to have the quick fix or the fast food or something from a box," especially in the American diet.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's how we've been trained, and snacking has significantly increased over the past 60 to 70 years. And I do think that snacking is a big cause of this metabolic epidemic that we're seeing just from diabetes and obesity and PCOS and tons of different issues that are all related to your metabolic health. So it is really hard. And that is okay. We can do hard things because if you do hard things, it ends up paying off and there's a benefit at the end. And so we have to find the balance of, okay, I can do the really hard thing at incorporating these things into my diet, but similar to what I said earlier, there's some things that food just can't accomplish. There is no
Yeah.
way that people are going to be able to eat 20 different foods a day or even a week, to be honest. And I see this all the time in my patients who I'll do a food log with them. And I'm just saying, just track your food for 3 days. It is the same thing over and over.
That's me.
And so where's the
Yeah.
diversity?
Right. That's a lot of us. I was
Yeah.
thinking about that this morning as I was chopping up my broccoli and my Brussels sprouts for my eggs that I ate yesterday and the day before. And then occasionally I'll throw in some organic oats, but it's the same
Mhm.
things every day.
Yeah, and for me, I love meat. So I have very little vegetables in my diet typically. I like to start my day with chicken sausage, and then I have ground bison and white rice for lunch, and then I'll typically have steak for dinner, and that's when I'll get some greens and I'll force myself to eat some arugula. But it's, pretty miserable for me to get a variety of
Just
different
chop up
greens
some
and vegetables.
broccoli, girl, and put
I
it in
love
the rice
broccoli,
and
but
bison.
I ate broccoli every day for my whole life. So then I was like, I'm over broccoli. I'm over Brussels sprouts because I do things to their death. So I'm guessing someone like me is probably the ideal customer for something like AG1 because it has how many different foods or nutrients within it?
Over 80 different ingredients.
Okay. Because that introduces the variety. And I think, I eat healthy. Those are healthy foods that I'm eating, but that only takes me so far. Growing up, my family cooked really well, but I was a fiend for fast food. I would purposely not eat my meals at home so that I could beg on the way to soccer practice to stop at like McDonald's. So I could get some chicken nuggets. And I'd sneak candy at school. My parents didn't want me to have candy, so I'd go to the vending machines and I'd get a Coca-Cola, I'd get a full thing of Starburst, and I'd get an Otis Spunkmeyer cookie at lunch. And I'm like, okay, I'm thriving with a bean and cheese burrito. Yeah, so I'm like,
how are you making it through soccer
that's
practice?
why I got the leaky gut.
Oh my gosh.
And I was weak and frail. So I'm like, I think that's super common. And I had access to healthy food from my family and parents. So many people don't because their parents are eating this way.
But I think what you said earlier, Dr. Esposito, about resilience. So
Yeah.
I think that there's something probably genetically and I am not a doctor, so you can definitely jump in, Dr. Esposito, and correct me on this. But I am guessing, because I think a lot of teenagers grew up eating bad diets and did not get all of the nutrients we needed, and then ran off to track or soccer practice and we're just fine.
Well, I
But
wasn't fine.
somehow it's impacted you negatively. And that probably goes back to a resiliency issue.
Oh, well, yeah.
Maybe we need to diagnose the
Well,
resiliency factor.
I think there's some other things in there. I think there are
Yeah.
some genetic
Yeah.
issues, but
I mean, we're
that's
just
a
going to
different,
die.
that's a different that's a different topic. I'm in the process of figuring that out.
Because I mean, I lived on Diet Coke and bubble gum for a good year of my life in high school and had zero effects. Like I was running great times on the track and did not have any sleep issues. Like did not have any leaky gut issues. So maybe I'm just more resilient than you are.
You might be. I mean, I was still a good athlete. I just definitely did not have any muscle mass on my body. I was running into the ground with cardio for soccer. So I think there's just different depending on the sport and all of that. But I guess going back to genetics, do you see people that are more predisposed to things like intestinal permeability
You got there. Good
problems
job.
or different health concerns that need more assistance nutritionally?
We threw a lot at you right
Yes.
there.
No, that, well, first of all, I'm not.
I'm like, okay, you want to fight today? Because I can fight. I came in a fighting mood, so sorry.
I am not going to be the judge of who is right. I am not the arbitrator. I have an opinion, but I will not. I will keep to myself. So there is this. I think I can ask you both: is do you feel different when you eat really well and you're on your game compared to when you're not?
Oh, yes.
I do not. I never feel, and that's
You're
always been a problem
so much
for me.
better.
It's not that,
So
but
much more resilient.
but it's really been a problem for me because I used to say this all the time. I will change my diet when I feel like I need to change my diet, and it wasn't until I got blood work.
She eats candy all the time. She
I
has
have-
these like Peppa Pig's candy things in her purse. And
I have car candy that I often keep around, but I did not feel differently. I've never felt differently based on what my diet has been. And even though I'm eating more fiber than I ever have in my life, and I feel no differently than I did 2 years ago prior to adding that fiber. But my blood work tells me that I am better. And that's been the difference for me is I've had to have blood work in order to, it also hasn't changed my body. My body looks the same, it weighs the same, everything's been the same.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
We're a good
And so
case study for you.
you are a challenging case. So the way that I would look at it is that there's multiple factors that are involved in the way that people feel. And when we look at it from a medical perspective, it's okay, well, we're going to look at their environment. Are they sleeping? Are they exercising? What medications are they taking? And what's their family history? Family history, this is the major takeaway. Family history is the most important thing when it comes to a understanding a person's medical health. It's the crystal ball that we as clinicians wish we had, and it's as close as we're ever going to get. And so genetics plays a huge role in this. But when we look at this from a discovery perspective, from a scientific perspective, we categorize them as a new terminology that you might not be familiar with. It's called the omics. So there's the microbiome, and there's the metabolome, and then there's the genome, right? And now we're getting into the phenome or phenomics, right? These are all different areas of science that is basically allowing us to understand why is it that each of these one individuals is acting or presenting differently. And when we look at huge randomized clinical trials, you have like 10,000 people. And I get this all the time. They'll say, we have 10,000 people. And in this study, we saw this benefit from this herb or this drug or this, nutrient. Now you have to take those 10,000 people and say, is that going to work in the person that's sitting right in front of me? And that is a complex question because you now need to take into consideration the entire person. So perhaps you can get away with bubblegum and car
Diet
candy and Diet Coke, right? You might be able to. What I would say though is that most people don't realize how well they can feel until they actually work to optimize those things. And it might not be today, but it can certainly be in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. I am not willing to bet my diet today for the next 10 years, right? I really want to bet my diet for the next 10 years and help understand how I can feel better today. And that's actually what we see a lot with patients, but also people who take AG1. They will stop and they'll say, I stopped and I really did not realize that I was actually going to the bathroom regularly and now I'm not. Or that afternoon craving, I wasn't feeling that so much before and now I'm starting to feel a little bit lethargic or feel a little bit low energy. And those are things that people don't realize. And so that is actually where we started is lifespan versus health span. If you really just care about getting to 90, cool. I promise you, we have the best people in the world to do that in America. If you want to really get to 90, but at a butt kicking 90-year-old, that is a totally different game. So it really just depends on what game are you trying to play and what is the end goal. And you have to train for that. The same way that you guys train for your metabolic health, for your endurance, for your physique. That's the game you're trying to play today. But there's a different game that many other people are trying to play for, year 100 of their life.
Yeah, I bet
Yeah,
you I
makes no
could
sense.
not feel good eating bubble gum and Diet Coke now.
Yeah, no way.
That would be
No way.
terrible. But when I was 16, it was great.
Yeah, I felt night and day when I started to eat better. I stopped eating fast food. I cut out soda. I stopped eating as much processed food. I still have a sweet tooth. I still have a Starbucks addiction. Like those things probably aren't going anywhere. But I remember it was when I had started working for Orange Theory. I was 21 at the time. This is 9 years ago. And I'm around all these people that are eating healthy and working out and doing things that are better. And I'm like, oh, yeah, eating enough protein, eating enough calories, eating different nutrients. And I was drinking a greens drink back then. It wasn't AG1, but that I did notice a huge difference. I took it for a couple years and then I don't know why I stopped. So I'm curious if I were to reintroduce that, how I'd feel.
It's a good test study.
Yeah. Just a little question though, since we talked about gut health, does exercise play a role in gut health or is it simply nutrition? And
Exercise is probably, oh, sorry, I cut you off.
oh, that's okay. I was just going to add also, I'd love to hear your take on how stress and your nervous system impacts your gut health.
If you had to pick the best medicine for gut health, it is exercise. It is probably, I don't know if it's undefeated, but it's pretty close to that. The second would be a Mediterranean-based type of diet. And the reason why I say almost undefeated is because there's an extent that exercising too much or extensively will actually promote intestinal permeability and can cause a lot of GI issues. And we see this a lot in marathon runners or endurance athletes, where they can't make it to the end of their event because they have too much GI issues. They feel nauseous. They unfortunately can't hold their bowel movements. That is a impact of over exercising. But when they do things like fecal matter transplants, which right now are only FDA approved for C. diff, but when they're doing a lot of these experiments, one of the gold standards for a good donor is an athlete, because an athlete has a very healthy microbiome, because the impact of exercise on your microbiome is incredibly impactful in a positive way. But you also need to eat well and incorporate some of those foods when it comes to, gut health. But exercise plays a huge role, and I'm sure you could probably see it in a lot of the people that you work with, is that they start exercising, and a lot of the things that they typically thought was a problem are starting to go away. And one of them is bowel regularity. Um, when I used to have IBS, my gastroenterologist was like, just go running. And I was like, I hate running.
Yeah,
But
So good
but
though.
it's
It makes such a
therapeutic.
big difference.
Well,
Yeah.
our early morning classes, before I was in my current role, I was working at the front desk for the longest time. I'd see the same groups of people every day. I knew all of their bowel movement routines
Yep.
because the second they got on that treadmill, they'd be out 10 minutes later.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh no, they're back in there.
But it's true.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it helps.
even just yeah, it's after you have a baby, and for a lot of women that do utilize medication, like pain medicine after they've had a baby, and it's hard because one of the things is constipation with these medications. Like, okay, well, stop the medication and go for a run. Go for a light run. Just start to move your body a
Yep.
little bit.
Maybe not after you have a baby.
Not right away. Give it some time because there's lots of things going on there. But like
Yeah.
if you are for several months still struggling with dysregularity, going for a run is really helpful for that.
That's right. Now, that doesn't assume that's assuming that people are having a regular exercise routine. So it's really with regular exercise. The great thing about nutrition and just, incorporating healthy nutrition habits into your lifestyle is everybody does it every single day, multiple times a day. And exercise, as much as I advise people to exercise as much as they possibly can per week, because most people are not, it's harder to incorporate on a daily basis. And so, what things can we do, today, immediately, are the things that will, you kind of put into your mouth, and your gut will take, first dibs on and incorporate into the body's metabolic and physiological functions. And so, one of the most important things I would say is prebiotics and probiotics are very well researched and the impact that they can have for gut health, but immune health. We're seeing now new probiotics having research around muscle recovery. We know this thing about the gut brain connection. It is not a fad. That is not a fad. That is a trend. That is real data showing that there is a huge connection between the gut and your brain and your nervous system, which really plays into your stress. And so we
Talk
cannot
about that
ignore
a little
that.
bit more. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more. Dig into that a little bit. I want to understand that a little more.
So your brain in your head, and then there's a brain in your gut. And so our brain is the central nervous system. This is really your spine and your brain, the gray matter, the white matter, etc. That has a very intricate connection with your gut. And then your gut has this different nervous system or a different brain called the enteric nervous system. It can pretty much function on its own. Yes, it does have signals with the brain and your central nervous system, but they communicate back and forth. And this enteric nervous system is literally lined within your intestinal tract, and it responds to the environment, but it also responds to your brain and to your body. And then there's things that we make in our gut that impact our enteric nervous system. Some of those things will communicate with the brain, and some of those things stay local. And so when you look at things like we cannot ignore the GLP-1, um, the tectonic shifts that GLP-1s are having in our society and medicine. And so those things, they are made by the gut. Now, the difference between the GLP-1 that you will take as a medication and the one that you take in the gut is just the duration in which they work. So the one that you make in your gut, they're very short-lived. They don't last very long, but your gut still makes them. And the amount that you would get with like an injection is much less, but has a longer impact because it's biochemically modified. And so these things like GLP-1s, neurotransmitters, GABA, serotonin, dopamine, all of these things are actually made in the gut, but they don't always impact the brain or impact the entire body. Some of it is localized. But now what we're learning is that they actually can impact the microbiome and impact the actual bugs and bacteria and the intestinal cells locally. An actual prime example of that would be serotonin, right? Many people would say most of the serotonin we make in the body is in the gut. That is true. And a lot of it actually just stays there. And it actually impacts the way that our gut contracts. So if somebody's serotonin is too high, they can overcontract. And then if somebody's serotonin is too low, it can slow down the process. And so my job as a human detective, it's kind of it's kind of my job of understanding what's going on in the human body. Is it actually intestinal permeability? Is it something else? Is it a food sensitivity? Is really to understand what is unique in this person or these people that we can modify. And I take that and I incorporate and say, okay, I am seeing that a vast amount of the research is saying these plant-based prebiotics are having a positive impact on gut health, on constipation, on mood. I'm going to bet that that would be beneficial for most people. And so I think it should be a foundation of people's nutritional regimen. And that's how we incorporate things into the product development perspective.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too. He just noted the individualized approach and how people really are looking for, we've talked about this before, the silver bullet. Whatever I saw on Instagram, that's going to be the thing that works for me. But it really does take detective work. It takes really understanding your body and what does feel right for you.
Yeah. So of the fads over the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, what do you think are the ones that are really impactful and important that we listen to and take action on? And then maybe tell us one or two that you roll your eyes at and like, what are we even talking about here?
So I said this earlier, the Mediterranean diet is undefeated. A little bias. I do come from an Italian culture, a very Mediterranean culture. I promise you that not all Italians eat the Mediterranean diet, whether they're in Italy or in Greece or in the Mediterranean region or in the US. But the Mediterranean diet, as a definition, is undefeated. It pretty much wins in every research and clinical study. That will not go away. What we should be doing is understanding why. Why is it? What are the things in there? Is it the fish? Is it the fibrous foods? Is it the olive oil? I bet you it's all of those things. And that's how nutrition works. And it's such a huge pet peeve of mine, which plays into this second part that you've asked, is many people look at nutrition and will say, it's the olive oil, let's isolate the olive oil, and therefore we'll get all the benefits from the olive oil. No, you actually need to have the olive oil, right? And you actually need to eat some of these foods to get the benefit. But we also look at that in terms of, I saw a study, vitamin C on immune health. I'm not convinced. Well, most people don't eat just vitamin C. They actually don't eat vitamin C at all. They eat foods that contain vitamin C, plus the thousands of other nutrients that vitamin C coexists with. So that is something that is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is that people try to isolate these nutrients and then assume that that applies to products as a whole. And in fact, you really need to look at things from this sum of the parts. So 1 + 1 = 3 approach, rather than just saying isolating each individual nutrient. And then I'll just tag along the other pet peeve would be like detoxes. It is a word that I teach my students. Don't I ever catch you saying that in class? Because then we're gonna have to have a whole lecture on biochemical elimination pathways in the body, and I will quiz you on it, and you will not like me. But let's try to go there.
Nothing will make me roll my eyes bigger than somebody that comes into one of the studios and says, "Oh, I'm on a detox." I'm like,
oh my gosh, when those juice cleanses were trending.
Oh my gosh. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Miserable.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear you say that. I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
Anti-detox.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of fads. Okay, this is a side question I thought, sorry, to bring us back to the gut health. I heard also, like, if you're eating constantly on the go when you're in a stress state, that's really bad for your gut health. And I like eat my lunch, well, my breakfast and my lunch in my car most days because I commute a lot. I'm driving all around the region. So I'm like, am I just stressing myself out while I'm eating and unable to digest?
Are you stressed while you're eating?
Well, I think I don't feel stressed often, but my Oura ring tells me I'm stressed all day, every day. So I don't feel it. So,
I feel it.
I have a healthy level of stress.
I feel my stress for sure.
I think I'm just chronically stressed. That's my norm.
This is the opposite, where I don't necessarily feel the changes to my diet, but I definitely feel the stress.
Yeah.
I definitely feel the stress.
Yeah.
I am stressed while I'm eating for sure.
Really?
And I eat standing up. I eat walking through my house.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrible.
So, not medical advice, but if you really want to get to the underlying cause of intestinal permeability, your fingers should be on stress management. And the reason why is because the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like your rest and digest system, has a direct impact on your digestion and the way that your stomach and your intestines function. Just as simple as how they contract. And then the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system need to be balanced to help with proper secretion of enzymes and acid in the stomach and in the intestinal tract. So if that is not working, you physically have a disadvantage in the way you digest your food.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm working on my breath right now. I've been deep breathing while you were giving that
I
response.
was too. I was like, I'm going to de-stress.
Yeah.
I'm going to breathe.
I'm going to really focus on that. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this information, answering our questions. This has been really insightful. I definitely feel like I have a few takeaways that I'm going to try to implement. So hopefully I can fix myself. And I know our listeners will really appreciate everything you shared.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you?
Pretty simple. It's Dr. Ralph Esposito on every handle that exists.
Okay. Are you active on those handles?
Mostly on Instagram. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, again, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. We will see you.
Thanks for having me.